Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, August 14, 2025. California Governor Gavin Newsom announces his state will vote on whether to redraw congressional district lines with the express purpose of Democrats gaining 5 more U.S. House seats to offset what's happening in Texas, where Republicans are trying to pass a new map to net 5 seats for their party. Governor Newsom calling it Liberation Day for California. President Donald Trump claims that the official crime data for Washington, D.C. is fake, and that crime in the nation's capital is the worst it's ever been, as his deployment of federal law enforcement and National Guard troops are ramping up. Wholesale inflation rises unexpectedly in July, up 3.3% versus last year, largest in 3 years. President Trump signs a proclamation on this 90th anniversary of the creation of Social Security, saying his administration is protecting and strengthening the programs. Democrats say that's not true. Also, President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin preview their meeting tomorrow in Anchorage, Alaska, to discuss the war in Ukraine. Israel announces a major expansion of settlements in the West Bank. And Hunter Biden says he will not apologize for saying the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein introduced First Lady Melania Trump to President Trump after Melania Trump threatens to sue him for $1 billion in damages. Fox News writes that California is center stage on Thursday in the national battle over congressional redistricting ahead of next year's midterm elections. Two-term Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom will team up with congressional Democrats and legislative leaders in the heavily blue state at an event in Los Angeles. That's where they will unveil their game plan to counter the push by President Donald Trump and Republicans to create up to 5 GOP-friendly congressional districts in red state Texas at the expense of currently Democratic controlled seats. Newsom said in a recent letter to the president, "If you will not stand down, I will be forced to lead an effort to redraw the maps in California to offset the rigging of maps in red states." Reporting from Fox News. Governor Newsom spoke at a news conference and rally in L.A. He began by noting what was happening outside the building.
Where are we? At Democracy Center. And right outside, at this exact moment, are dozens and dozens of ICE agents. Donald Trump, you think it's coincidental? No. Donald Trump and his minions, Tom Homan, tough guy, clearly decided, coincidentally or not, that this was a location to advance ICE arrests. Indiscriminate? Perhaps. We'll find out later. It was certainly indiscriminate when a 15-year-old disabled boy had a gun put to his head in Los Angeles trying to go to school just a few days ago. I met with it. I don't need to belabor this, except I want to level set. People are scared. People are fearful.
California Governor Gavin Newsom opening up his speech in Los Angeles. Then he moved on to the formal announcement about congressional redistricting in the state, designed to gain Democrats 5 more U.S. House seats to offset the effort by Republicans in Texas to do the same to gain their party 5 seats.
We're here because Donald Trump, on January 6th, tried to light democracy on fire, tried to wreck this country. Tried to steal an election, as Alex just said, by trying to dial in for 11, almost 12,000 votes. And here we are, an open in plain sight before one vote is cast in the 2026 midterm election. And here he is once again trying to rig the system. He doesn't play by a different set of rules. He doesn't believe in the rules. And as a consequence, we need to disabuse ourselves of the way things have been done. It's not good enough to just hold hands, have a candlelight vigil, and talk about the way the world should be. We have got to recognize the cards that have been dealt. And we have got to meet fire with fire. And we've got to be held to a higher level of accountability. So that's what this is about. It's not complicated. We're doing this in reaction to a president of the United States that called a sitting governor of the state of Texas and said, "Find me 5 seats." We're doing it in reaction to that act. We're doing it mindful of our higher angels and better angels. We're doing it mindful that we want to model better behavior, as we've been doing for 15 years in the state of California with our independent redistricting commission. But we cannot unilaterally disarm. We can't stand back and watch this democracy disappear. We can't stand back and watch this democracy disappear district by district all across this country, not just in Texas, but in Missouri, where J.D. Vance went just a week ago, in Indiana, in places like Ohio, in places like Florida. We need to stand up, not just California. Other blue states need to stand up. We need to be firm in our resolve. We need to put back. So we're here in that light. And I'm grateful to have remarkable partners in the legislature. It's a tall task. We're asking them for 2/3 of a legislative consent. But this is the difference. This is the difference between what's happening in Texas and what's happening here in California. We didn't receive a phone call from the President of the United States to then quietly go in the back room and start drawing maps and legislatively try to jam them through against the consent of the people. We're doing precisely the opposite. We're working through a very transparent, temporary, and public process. We're putting the maps on the ballot, and we're giving the power to the people. This will be the first redistricting that's ever done that. That's the difference. We tried to raise the standards, and these guys are not playing by any set of rules. So this time requires us to act anew, not just think anew.
California Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, at today's news conference and rally in Los Angeles. He said the vote on the maps will be November 4th. The maps would only take effect if Texas and other states do move forward with their own redistricting efforts, and the new maps in California would remain in effect through the 2030 elections, and after that, they would return to the Independent Redistricting Commission approved by voters more than a decade ago. There's a story from Politico. Governor Newsom faces a major hurdle in his quest to revamp the state's congressional lines. According to a new poll, Californians' deep support for their current Independent Redistricting Commission. By nearly a 2-to-1 margin, voters prefer keeping an independent line-drawing panel to determine the state's House seats. The latest Politico Citron Center Possibilities Lab survey found just 36% of respondents back returning congressional redistricting authority to state lawmakers. That was from Politico. CNN writes that Texas House Democratic lawmakers signaled on Thursday they are preparing to end their standoff over redistricting and return to the state. The lawmakers issued a statement saying they would return to Texas under 2 conditions: Texas House Republicans adjourning their first special session, which is expected to take place on Friday, and California introducing plans to redraw congressional maps in their state. It's not immediately clear when they would return, but their statement indicates they are ready to end a nearly 2-week standoff to prevent Republicans in Texas from moving forward with redistricting efforts that will net GOP as many as 5 U.S. House seats. That was from CNN. Texas Governor Greg Abbott was interviewed on Fox News Digital on Wednesday about the Republican efforts to get the Democrats to come back.
We have Texas law enforcement scouring the streets of Texas right now to identify whether or not there are any Democrats remaining in the state of Texas. And if they are, they will be arrested and taken to the Texas Capitol to try to make quorum. So you can understand the math here. The quorum break is in the Texas House. The Texas House has a 2/3 vote requirement in order to have a quorum. They have 150 members. So bottom line, we need 100 members there. There are 88 Republicans who are ready, there, and able to work. We need 12 Democrats to show up. So we're looking for 12 Democrats in the state of Texas, or if they're all out of state, we're looking to identify them. And as you point out, using federal officials and others to assist us in that effort. Legal action has been filed in California, in Illinois, and other states to try to hold the Democrats there accountable and to bring them back home. There have been some identification of some people paying for it. And I got to tell you, it raises a serious legal question for these candidates or these office holders, and that is they were promised money if they did break quorum. That would be a bribe that could lead to a felony charge. And so that also is something that the Texas Attorney General is investigating, and actually even got a temporary injunction from a court stopping any more money being given to these House members because of the potential bribe consequences. But these House members are going to be facing not just the challenges of having to come back and deal with the consequences of their failure to be here, but also deal with potential bribery charges against them. These Democrats in other states are just completely out of control. They've been engaged in gerrymandering for decades in California, Illinois, New York, and elsewhere. And what they have lost touch with is the people. What we're doing in our state is to make sure that we are going to have the districts represented by people who actually represent these voters. What's happened here is that the law changed in the state of Texas last year that authorized the state to be able to redraw these lines because of a legal change that doesn't require coalition districts. So we're able to draw these districts in a way in which representatives are going to be lining up with the values of the voters of the state of Texas.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Republican, on Fox News Digital on Wednesday. Today's Texas House Representatives session was very brief.
The House will come to order. It is evident to the chair that a quorum is not present. Without objection, the House stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Friday.
That's Speaker of the Texas House, Dustin Burrows, a Republican, and when the House meets on Friday, it's expected to adjourn sine die, and Governor Abbott expected to call the second special legislative session to deal with redistricting and also other agenda items, including the recent Texas floods. KHOU TV reporting that Governor Abbott has activated multiple state emergency response teams as a tropical weather system is forecast to impact the Texas Gulf Coast and South Texas starting on Friday. This is Washington Today. Washington Post writes that tensions over President Donald Trump's deployment of federal law enforcement erupted on a busy Northwest Washington street Wednesday night as a mix of local and federal authorities pulled over drivers for seatbelt violations or broken taillights, while nearly 100 onlookers chanted, "Go home, fascists." The checkpoint, which appeared to begin around 8 p.m. Eastern, included more than 20 law enforcement officers, many wearing face coverings and vests labeled HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. Some vests indicated agents were with Enforcement and Removal Operations, a branch of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement that arrests and removes undocumented immigrants. That's a story from the Washington Post. Here's some of the video as posted by WJLA TV.
I've never been embarrassed to do my job. Some people look at me like a cop and hear about how that feels.
Let's follow in order!
Cover your face up.
That's what the Nazis did!
Some of the video by WJLA TV Channel 7 in Washington. And CBS News writing that a man who admitted throwing a sandwich at a federal law enforcement officer deployed in Washington, D.C., worked at the Justice Department and has been fired. Attorney General Pam Bondi said Thursday in a post on X. Bondi wrote that she had just learned that this defendant worked at the Department of Justice no longer. Not only is he fired, he has been charged with a felony. President Donald Trump was asked today about his deployment of federal agents and National Guard to D.C. and invoking the law allowing him to take control of D.C. police.
On crime, do you have a message for the Democrat lawmakers like Nancy Pelosi or media who are saying after living here for many years that there is no crime and you're trying to start a new news cycle?
It's another reason why the Democrats lost the election in a landslide. They lie. It's just lie. Look, the crime is very bad. I think they'd be much better off saying, we want to help President Trump with the crime because it's an epidemic. It's a tragic situation. It's the worst it's ever been. And we want to help President Trump with the crime as opposed to, he's a dictator. He's a dictator. People are so happy to see our military going into D.C. and getting these thugs out. As you know, we arrested a lot of people yesterday. We arrested a lot of people today. We're getting people that have arrest records that you wouldn't believe. 28 arrests, 15 arrests, brutal people. And we're going to have to do something about this cashless bail because people shoot somebody, they kill somebody, and they're out on the street in less than an hour. Now, that's when it's all started in New York, in Chicago, Los Angeles. You take a look. If we didn't go to Los Angeles to help this incompetent governor and a mayor that doesn't know what the hell she's doing, if we didn't go to Los Angeles, you wouldn't have a big part of it burned down. The other part of it would have burned down, too.
President Donald Trump answering reporters' questions today in the White House Oval Office. New York Times with an article about a radio interview he did earlier in the day. President Trump said in the interview on Thursday he had resolved to act before the fact in deploying federal agents and National Guard troops in the nation's capital, despite violent crime in the city being at a 30-year low. Mr. Trump told Fox News' Brian Kilmeade that in 2020 he waited on Minnesota Governor, a Democrat, to call out the National Guard during the protest in Minneapolis over the police killing of George Floyd, falsely claiming that the whole city was burning down. That was from the New York Times. President Trump said this week that he will be asking Congress to extend beyond 30 days the federal takeover of D.C. police allowed under the Home Rule Act. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, told Aaron Parnas in his online program that Democrats in the Senate will work to block that.
Do you think that he's going to end up going to Congress? Because he can't revoke complete home rule authority for D.C. without actually going to Congress first. He can't even extend this past 30 days without going to you all first. Have you heard that that's what he plans on doing? And if he went to Congress and said, you know what, there's this crime emergency, we need the National Guard out there longer, we need to take over Washington, D.C., would you grant it?
No way. We'll fight him tooth and nail.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Aaron Parnas YouTube program on Wednesday. D.C. Councilmember Brooke Pinto, a Democrat, was interviewed Wednesday night on MSNBC about what's happening in the city.
We should be focused on serious policy solutions to address serious problems. That is not what this is. The vast majority of young people in Washington, D.C. are doing amazing things, are going to school, are thriving, just ended summer camp. And we are lucky to have them being contributing members of our society. When it comes to juvenile crime, which I am very concerned with, anytime a young person picks up a gun, that is absolutely not acceptable. And there are interventions that we're working on to drive that down even further over the 20% reduction that we've had over this past year. Like last month, I moved an emergency piece of legislation to authorize our police chief to have juvenile curfew zones in areas of the city where we were seeing large groups of young people congregate and engage in violence. There are other ways, to your point, that the federal government can be helpful in helping us solve some of this crime and drive it down, like filling judicial vacancies, like stepping up their court social services efforts to make sure that kids who are on pretrial release are actually being monitored, like filling the $1 billion budget gap that Congress has left us arbitrarily in the spring. Those are ways to help us with public safety that we would welcome. Sending in the National Guards to patrol our streets is not the answer to our crime challenges.
Councilmember, you referenced that 30-day window. You also, I'm sure, heard the president's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, being very wishy-washy with that timeline. If Congress were to come back and were to vote to extend that window, what does that actually look like for D.C.? And what recourse does D.C. have if you, as one of its leaders, if the mayor decides it is actually not in D.C.'s best interest to have the Guard there?
Well, I remain committed to ensuring that every person in Washington, D.C. is safe. And I am on the Hill regularly meeting with members of Congress and the House and the Senate and articulating to them and really educating them in many ways on how our unique structure in D.C. works, what we are doing to address public safety and drive down crime, and where we can use and would welcome their partnership and collaboration. And so my ask to Congress is to not extend this period of 30 days, but to work with us meaningfully to ensure that every person can be safe in the nation's capital, because that's what our country and our city deserves.
D.C. Councilmember Brooke Pinto, Democrat, on MSNBC Tuesday night. Another update from the New York Times. Washington's police chief issued an order permitting officers to share information with federal immigration authorities about people not in custody, such as those detained during traffic stops, a limited carve-out to a broader ban on cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. The directive came as a top federal official proclaimed the end of Washington's status as a sanctuary city. This is Washington Today. Today is the 90th anniversary of President Franklin D. Roosevelt signing into law the Social Security Act, which created the federal safety net programs covering unemployment, illness, disability, death, and retirement. President Trump today signing a proclamation in the White House Oval Office saying that the act is a monumental legislative achievement and, thanks to my administration's efforts, Social Security now stands stronger and more resilient than ever before.
Almost 60 million American seniors rely on Social Security for peace of mind and a life of dignity and retirement. These Americans paid into the system, and they deserve leaders in Washington who are going to protect the benefits they've had and protect Social Security. Under Biden, Social Security went down like nobody's ever seen it, deteriorated. There's never been anything like it. The 4 years of Biden were very, very destructive. It couldn't have gone on much longer. Social Security was going to be destroyed. It was being destroyed. The average call wait time reached an all-time high of more than 42 minutes. Field office wait times were at 32 minutes, which is unheard of, and the disability claims backlog was the longest ever in recorded history. In other words, it was run just like the country was run. It was run really badly. But I'm pleased to report that under our leadership, and Frank in particular, the changes he's made and what he's done is sort of a miracle. Sort of like what happened with the country as a whole. Field office wait times are now down 30% since last year, and it looks like it's going to a total record number. And the record was set in a long time ago when the world was a lot different place, and we're gonna beat that record. Call wait times are down 73% while serving twice as many customers per day. The disability claims backlog is down 26%, and seniors now have 24/7 online access to their accounts, which they never had before, whereas under Biden, the website was down 29 hours a week for maintenance purposes. It was essentially not open very much. They were always maintaining it, but they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They had a person running that had no idea what they were doing. Among my very first acts was to order all government employees to return to the office or be removed from the job, which means our Social Security offices are now open for full business hours 5 days a week. So unlike being shut down all the time, we're open at record levels also. We're making it really great for the people that want and demand Social Security, and they paid into the system. They deserve it. Last month, I signed one big, beautiful bill and allowed no tax on Social Security for our great seniors, okay? So how's that? Not bad, right? No tax on Social Security for our seniors. And to protect our benefits, we've already kicked nearly 275,000 illegal aliens off of the Social Security system. These are people, many of them have already left the country, and yet we were sending them checks all the time. And 275,000, and that number is now even larger than that, Frank. It's an unbelievable job.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office, and beside him, the Social Security Administrator Frank Bisignano. President making some remarks and also signing a proclamation on this 90th anniversary of Social Security. Congresswoman Teresa Ledger Fernandez, Democrat from New Mexico, posted a video about the anniversary.
Donald Trump is lying to every senior in America, and I can prove it. Recently, 90 million seniors received an email from the Social Security Administration claiming that the big, ugly bill would eliminate taxes on Social Security for most retirees. That's a lie. Here's the truth. Their law doesn't eliminate Social Security taxes. It just creates a temporary tax deduction for some seniors. More than half of Social Security recipients don't owe taxes in the first place. So you get nothing. Some other examples. Under 65, no break. Make less than $25,000 a year, no break. Married and filing separately, no break. Expect to receive your Social Security benefits after 2028? You guessed it, no break, because that tax deduction expires. So why send an email line to 90 million seniors? Because Trump and the Republicans who supported that big ugly bill want to distract you from the fact that billionaires got a permanent tax break that is going to bankrupt this country. Social Security Administration is aware that their original email was a lie because they quietly updated their website to tell the truth. But they didn't let you know that, did they? Did you get a second email? You didn't. But you know what? The bigger problem is that the Trump proposal would bankrupt Social Security by 2032. Now, Democrats have a better plan. Our bill, Social Security 2100, would make sure that the wealthy also pay Social Security taxes. If you make everybody pay their fair share, we actually solve the problem, we increase your benefits, and we make sure that Social Security is around when you need it. I really like the Democrat plan, and I really don't like Trump lying to seniors.
Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez, Democrat from New Mexico, posting that video today. Newsweek writes the Department of Veterans Affairs on Wednesday announced it had processed more disability benefits claims in a single year than ever before. The VA said it reached the milestone by August 8th, having processed 2,524,115 benefits, compensation, and pension ratings claims in the current fiscal year, which still has nearly 2 months to run. That was from Newsweek. From Fox Business, wholesale inflation increased much more than expected in July, raising concerns about a resurgence of inflationary pressures in the economy. The Bureau of Labor Statistics on Thursday released the Producer Price Index, PPI, for the month of July, which showed an increase of 0.9% from the prior month and 3.3% from a year ago. Those PPI figures were much hotter than the forecast of prices, rising 0.2% on a monthly basis. Core PPI, which excludes volatile components like food and energy, also rose 0.9% from last month and was up 3.7% from a year ago. That was from Fox Business. Peter Navarro, the senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, was asked about this as he spoke to reporters in the White House driveway.
If you look at it, this is the kind of thing I used to do in my previous life, wrote textbooks on economic indicators and things like that. What you want to see is whether the PPI numbers will move to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is not always the case at all. We also know that the PPI is highly volatile. We also know there's going to be some people who are going to try to make it a tariff story, but if you peer beneath the hood of the numbers, there's nothing in there to suggest that tariffs were responsible for a number that was above estimates. So this is clearly a case where you just watch the data now, and you watch it really carefully. And as the boss says, let's see what happens. All right, thank you for being with you today.
Tariffs, what is it causing the PPI to go up?
Is the administration working on possible sanctions?
Pete Navarro, White House trade advisor, speaking to reporters in the White House driveway. And on Wall Street, the Dow down 11, NASDAQ down 2, S&P up 1. Also about Peter Navarro, Reuters reports that he said Thursday the Trump administration is likely to levy tariffs on pharmaceutical imports under a Section 232 trade investigation because, quote, it's very clear that we have a national security crisis due to U.S. reliance on foreign producers in the sector. In a televised interview with CNBC, Navarro did not provide any details on the timing of the Section 232 probe. That was from Reuters. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Past president, why are you doing this? This is outrageous.
This is a kangaroo court.
This fall, C-SPAN presents a rare moment of unity, Ceasefire, where the shouting stops and the conversation begins. Join Political Playbook Chief Correspondent and White House Bureau Chief Dasha Burns as host of Ceasefire, bringing two leaders from opposite sides of the aisle into a dialogue to find common ground. Ceasefire, this fall on the network that doesn't take sides, only on C-SPAN.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Russia's Vladimir Putin sounded positive Thursday, writes NBC News, on the eve of his talks with President Donald Trump in Alaska, saying he believed the American leader was making quite energetic and sincere efforts towards peace in Ukraine. Those efforts are intended, quote, to create long-term conditions of peace between our countries and in Europe and in the world as a whole, he added, particularly if the negotiations extended to cover strategic offensive weapons treaties. This suggests that a deal on nuclear arms control could be part of the talks. Russia suspended its participation in the New START Reduction in Strategic Offensive Arms Agreement in 2023. That was from NBC News. President Putin spoke to a meeting of advisors in Moscow.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I asked you to gather today in order to inform you about how the negotiation process on the Ukrainian crisis is going, how the bilateral negotiations with the Ukrainian delegation are going. One way or another, many of those present know, of course, about the general features, but I will tell you in more detail. That's the first thing. And the second thing is to talk about the stage we are at with the current American administration, which, as everyone knows, is making, in my opinion, quite energetic and sincere efforts to stop the military actions, stop the crisis, and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict, in order to create long-term conditions for peace between our countries and in Europe and in the world as a whole. If by the next stages we reach agreements in the area of control over strategic attackers and weapons. That's what I wanted to say at the beginning.
Russian President Vladimir Putin opening a meeting with advisors in Moscow. That video and the interpretation from Times Now World. President Donald Trump flies out early Friday morning from Washington to Anchorage, Alaska, where he'll be meeting with President Putin one-on-one at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, according to both Russia and the White House, and a joint news conference scheduled Friday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll have live coverage on the C-SPAN networks. President Trump spoke about that meeting today in the White House Oval Office.
Does Putin have a strong hand tomorrow?
Well, he came to our country, and I heard CNN fake news talking about that was a big win for him. Normally, he would say the opposite, but they said, oh, it's a big win that he came here. Normally, he would say the opposite, he came here. I think that President Putin would like to see a deal. I think if I weren't president, he would take over all of Ukraine. It's a war that should have never happened. If I weren't president, in my opinion, he would much rather take over all of Ukraine. But I am president, and he's not going to mess around with me.
On Russia, Mr. President, would you support or agree to reducing NATO troops in Europe, in countries like Poland, in order to get Russia to agree to a peace deal?
That hasn't been put before me, and I'll think about that for later, but it has not been put before me. Go ahead.
Is anything less than an unconditional and immediate ceasefire a victory for the U.S.?
Tomorrow?
Yes.
Well, tomorrow we'll see. I say, I don't know where that comes from. It's sort of not a good question. I would say that tomorrow all I want to do is set the table for the next meeting, which should happen shortly. I'd like to see it happen very quickly, very shortly after this meeting. I'd like to see it actually happen maybe in Alaska, where we just stay because it's so much easier. But I think that it's going to be very interesting. We're going to find out where everybody stands, and I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out, whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting. And if it's a bad meeting, it'll end very quickly. And if it's a good meeting, we're going to end up getting peace in the pretty near future.
President Donald Trump answering reporters' questions in the White House Oval Office. He said at another point during this news conference that more important meeting will be the second meeting that includes Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and he said maybe some of the European leaders. The president was asked about reports that he's considering offering President Putin a deal involving Alaskan or Ukrainian minerals in exchange for ending the war in Ukraine. President Trump saying, as far as rare earth, that's very unimportant relative. I'm trying to save lives. The Pew Research Center with a press release today ahead of U.S. President Donald Trump's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday. 59% of Americans say they are not confident that Trump can make wise decisions about the Russia-Ukraine war. 4 in 10 express confidence in him on this issue, according to a new Pew Research Center survey. The public also remains more likely to say Trump is favoring Russia too much, 33%, than to say he's favoring Ukraine too much, 6%. About 3 in 10, 28%, say he is striking about the right balance. An additional 32% aren't sure. That was from the press release from Pew Research Center. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio asked today about the Friday meeting. Rubio was at the State Department in Washington. It was at the conclusion of an unrelated event. He was meeting with the Foreign Minister of Paraguay to sign an agreement dealing with immigration, letting asylum seekers in the U.S. pursue protection claims in Paraguay. Here is Secretary Rubio.
How are the preparations for the Putin-Trump meeting going in Alaska?
They're going very fast because this was put together very quickly, and it's in Alaska, so we've got to get there. We'll see how tomorrow plays out. As the president said, his hope is to interact with Mr. Putin tomorrow and sort of get a sense very quickly and early whether a peace is possible or not. The president's spoken to him, I believe, 4 times by phone. I felt it was important to now speak to him in person and look him in the eye and figure out what was possible and what isn't. This is the president of peace. He wants that war to end. He's going to do everything he possibly can. If he sees an opportunity to talk about achieving peace, he's going to pursue it. And we'll know tomorrow at some point, as the president said, probably very early in that meeting, whether something is possible or not. We hope it is.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio answering reporters' questions today at the State Department. There was another question about Friday's meeting between Presidents Trump and Putin.
Secretary, do you think that Ukraine is prepared to cede any lands that are currently in its control, or are we looking at more a return of potentially Russian forces from the current front line of the war?
Well, to achieve a peace, I think we all recognize that there'll have to be some conversation about security guarantees. There'll have to be some conversation about territorial disputes and claims and what they're fighting over. All these things will be part of a comprehensive thing. But I think the president's hope is to achieve some stoppage of fighting so that those conversations can happen. These are highly technical things that take some time to work out. So to have a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, you will need agreement from both Ukraine and Russia. And this war has been going on for 3.5 years now. It was a war that started under the previous administration. The president's inherited that, and he's trying to do now what he can to bring it to an end. But obviously, the longer these wars go on, the harder they are to end. And even as I speak, even as we talk here now, there are changes happening in the battlefield which have an impact on what one side views as leverage or the other. So that's the reality of ongoing fighting, which is why a ceasefire is so critical. That's been our proposal from Jeddah when we left in Saudi Arabia. But we'll see what's possible tomorrow. Let's see how the talks go. And we're hopeful. We want there to be a peace. We're going to do everything we can to achieve one. But ultimately, it'll be up to Ukraine and Russia to agree to one.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the State Department in Washington today. BBC News writes that Sir Keir Starmer and Volodymyr Zelensky believe there is a viable chance of a ceasefire in Ukraine, but Vladimir Putin must prove he is serious about peace, Downing Street has said. United Kingdom Prime Minister held a breakfast meeting with Ukrainian President ahead of a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Putin in Alaska on Friday discussed ending the war in Ukraine. That was from BBC News. Israel's far-right finance minister, begins an AP story, announced approval Thursday of contentious new settlement construction in the Israeli-occupied West Bank, which Palestinians and rights group worry will scuttle plans for a Palestinian state by effectively cutting the territory into 2 parts. The finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich boasted that the construction, which is expected to receive final approval later this month, could thwart Palestinian statehood plans. It came as many countries, including Australia, Britain, France, and Canada, say they will recognize a Palestinian state in September. The construction on a tract of land east of Jerusalem, named E1, has been under consideration for more than 2 decades and is especially controversial because it is one of the last geographic links between the major West Bank cities of Ramallah and Bethlehem. Minister Smotrich did his news conference almost entirely in Hebrew. The AP article has a few excerpts translated. He said, "This reality finally buries the idea of a Palestinian state because there is nothing to recognize and no one to recognize. Anyone in the world who tries today to recognize a Palestinian state will receive an answer from us on the ground." There was one moment in the news conference when he spoke English, when he was asked if the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump approved this.
Has Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to this plan, and has Donald Trump agreed?
Of course. What's the question?
Tell me more about Trump.
I will speak Hebrew because it will be more comfortable for me.
And then he did go back to Hebrew during the news conference in the West Bank. The settlement construction came up today at the United Nations at the daily press conference of Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General.
Israel has announced new settlement construction in the West Bank, which the Palestinians and human rights groups say will basically destroy prospects for a two-state solution by cutting the West Bank in 2 parts. Does the Secretary General have any comment on this announcement?
Well, as far as I saw, I think that was also the statement made by the Israeli finance minister to eliminate the possibility of a two-state solution. Our position on settlements is clear. The Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and the regime that's associated with these settlements go against international law. Settlements, to state the obvious, further entrench the occupation, put the prospect of a two-state solution even further away. And as you said, if this went ahead, and which we call on the Israeli government not to do, and we call them to reverse to stop the advancement of this process, it would sever the northern and southern West Banks. And I think, interestingly enough, as the Israeli finance minister and the Palestinians and other NGOs all agree, it would put an end to the prospects of a two-state solution.
Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General, at his daily news conference at the UN in New York City. Story from Reuters: some settlers moved to the West Bank for religious or ideological reasons, while others were drawn by lower housing costs and government incentives. They include American and European dual citizens. About 700,000 Israeli settlers live among 2.7 million Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Israel annexed East Jerusalem in 1980, a move not recognized by most countries, but has not formally extended sovereignty over the West Bank. Israel cites historical and biblical ties to the area and says the settlements provide strategic depth and security. That was from Reuters. Today is the 13th anniversary of the kidnapping of freelance reporter Austin Tice while he was reporting in Syria during that country's civil war. Syrian intelligence files recently uncovered by the BBC after the fall of Bashar al-Assad confirm that Tice had been held by the Assad regime. Austin Tice's mother, Deborah Tice, has been an advocate since the disappearance in 2012, traveling many times to the Middle East and working with the U.S. government. Today, she was at the National Press Club in Washington and spoke about what has happened during the second Trump administration.
Then there was the first meeting at the White House, and I was going to be meeting with the National Security Advisor. That was Mike Waltz. And to my surprise, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was in the room. And she was in the room to make it known that Mark and Deborah Tice, the parents of Austin Tice, had every reason to see every bit of information about their son every bit of intelligence of all the agencies under her purview. Now, one of the agencies not under her purview is the State Department. We'll get to that later. They were very happy to show us fully redacted pages, many fully blank pages. That made them very proud. So anyway, she made that happen. She was very much absolute to the agencies under her that this was going to happen, and it did happen. Mark and I did go to Tyson, and we did see all of that intel. We'll be talking about that later. Once again, the Washington Post graciously arranged for me to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner and the Gridiron Dinner. There were moving tributes to Austin, but President Trump did not attend, so I really miss seeing him again.
Would you
Not
like to
much
have a
more.
meeting with President Trump?
I haven't yet.
No. Why don't you say that you'd like to have a meeting with President Trump at this time?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Say it.
Okay, let's see. Oh, guess what, guys? I think that was the end of it. Ta-da! Yeah. So, anyway, it's been a really busy year. And, you know, we're on a real roller coaster thinking about Austin coming home. My son is not dead, and we are working to get him home.
Yes. Very good.
Deborah Tice, the mother of Austin Tice, at the National Press Club today. Austin Tice, the U.S. journalist who disappeared in Syria while reporting 13 years ago today. BBC News reported this past June that a senior Syrian military official claims that former Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad ordered Austin Tice's execution. And finally, on Washington today, from USA Today, First Lady Melania Trump has put former first son Hunter Biden on notice, but he's not flinching. On August 6th, the First Lady threatened to sue the son of former President Joe Biden for more than $1 billion if he doesn't retract the claim that she was introduced to her husband by convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. But that hasn't stopped the scandal-ridden younger Biden, who was pardoned by his father after pleading guilty to tax violations and was convicted on firearms-related charges. On August 14th, Hunter Biden hit back with an expletive-laden response saying he had read the account of newspaper articles dating back to 2019. That was from USA Today. Hunter Biden was on Channel 5 with Andrew Callahan on YouTube.
I've got $1 billion document in my hands because Mrs. Trump is seeking $1 billion in damages if we don't take the video down, and if Hunter here doesn't issue a formal apology to Mrs. Trump. So now we're here maybe to give you the platform to apologize to the First Lady for your statements that you made about her possible connection to Jeffrey Epstein.
That's not going to happen.
Hunter Biden, son of former President Joe Biden, in the YouTube interview. The original does have the expletive. The letter from First Lady Melania Trump's attorney says that the claim from Hunter Biden is false, disparaging, defamatory, and inflammatory. Hunter Biden went on to explain why he thinks that's not so.
What I said was what I have heard and seen reported and written, primarily from Michael Wolff, but also dating back all the way to 2019, when the New York Times, I think Annie Carney and Maggie Haberman reported that sources said that Jeffrey Epstein claimed to be the person to introduce Donald Trump to Melania at that time. And then it was, I think, excerpted in a book that was published in Vanity Fair. And I think it's been repeated by journalists and authors since then. But the primary source was the interviews that Michael Wolff has been conducting, in which he has actually tapes of, I think, hours and hours and hours of interviews with Jeffrey Epstein directly. So, fact of the matter is that, I don't think that these threats of a lawsuit are add up to anything other than a design distraction, because it's not about who introduced whom to who. I don't know how that's in any way rises to the level of defamation to begin with, but the fact of the matter is that this is about hundreds, if not over 1,000 minors, children who were raped by Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't believe in guilt by association alone, but the connections that become they're so glaringly obvious that I think they're trying to use other things to distract. And I also think they're bullies, and they think that $1 billion is going to scare me, which is, the fact of the matter is that if they'd like to go, I have this to say to them, if they want to sit down for a deposition and clarify the nature of the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein, if the president and the first lady want to do that, and all of the known associates around them at the time of whatever time that they met, I'm more than happy to provide them the platform to be able to do it.
Hunter Biden, son of former President Joe Biden, on Channel 5 with Andrew Callahan on YouTube. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.